Safety Initiative. We're outside of the beautiful CDC trailer right now, and today we're going to work on some lasagna gardening. So that might sound kind of jargony, but can you tell us what lasagna gardening is, Mary?
Yeah, so basically we're getting the garden ready for winter and for next spring. And lasagna gardening is one method that you can do in the fall or the spring to get your beds ready without having to till. Fall is better because you're going to be layering different materials. So we're going to be layering cardboard, straw, and some compost a few different times, I think, and watering it in. And it's better to do it in the fall because then it has a chance to break down over the winter. You can do it in the spring, but you'll have less time to break down, so you might need to add more soil amendments like fertilizer or more broken down compost or aged manure. But if you do it in the fall, it can break down during the colder months, and then you don't have to till in the spring. You'll have really nice, rich soil ready for planting.
It sounds like if we're going to layer this stuff down, that we might need to first take down some of the kind of tall, brackish stuff we have going on, yeah?
Yeah. So we're going to come over here, actually. So as you can see, we have about 10 beds in this garden. Everything's a little dead now, but it was beautiful and blooming a few weeks ago. And so we're just going to focus on this bed today. We'll be doing the whole garden, but just for the purposes of this video, we'll just show you the one. We are going to cut down the plants. We're not going to yank them out by the root because leaving roots in the soil helps prevent erosion, which is something we don't want the soil to erode over the winter because these beds were tilled earlier this spring. And so the soil is going to be a little bit looser, so we want to make sure that that nice, rich soil stays. And leaving the roots in the ground is also really good because there's this thing called the mycelium network, which is basically a system of fungi that lives beneath the soil, and they interact with roots, and the roots give the fungi carbohydrates, and the fungi basically give the roots and the plants other minerals and nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus that they need to survive. So it's a really nice symbiotic relationship. So if you're going to rip the roots out of the ground, you're going to disturb that entire network that's alive beneath the soil, which is not going to be good for the health of your garden in the long run. So in order to have the soil keep that network nice and alive and ready to be there for next spring, we're going to leave the roots in the ground, prevent erosion, and so that our garden in the spring will have kind of a support system already underneath there to help the plants when we put them in the ground.
Yeah, so it sounds like we're going to cut them down, leave the roots so we hold the dirt, it doesn't get washed out over the winter time. But so do we want to get started on some?
We're going to try our best not to take the roots out. These sunflowers are a little big, so we'll see how that goes. But
yeah, so I must try not. If you have things like these kind of wild sunflowers and they're on the edge of your garden bed, you can leave them over the winter too. So some birds and other kind of critters like the seeds. So if you're feeling a little lazy and you don't want to take all of these things and cut them down to lasagna garden, you can always layer stuff around them too. So you got options.
Optional, but when your plants die, so we like to have the sunflowers in the garden to help pollinate. So these flowers will attract bees, birds, other bugs, and they're going to help pollinate the flowers. So basically their seeds will carry genetic material from different flowers and they'll be able to grow next year. If you want, you can just take the buds of the flower once they're dead and then save the seeds that are going to be on the underneath, on the inside. And then you can plant them next year, you can share them with friends. You can also just leave them and let them self-seed. But if you want to share the seeds with friends, saving them is a cool option. So, we've finished taking down the sunflowers. I'm going to take these over to the compost pile so that they can break down and be soil for next year. And since we're going to start layering some cardboard, right? Yeah, cool.
Nice because you go to the grocery store for lots of businesses around here, and you ask for cardboard, they'll give you theirs for free. So low cost. This is a great way to keep your weeds down. So if you're notoriously having a lot of weeds coming up around your garden, if you layer cardboard this fall, that's one easy way to keep them from popping back up. Also to keep it from being quite so muddy, which will be nice.
A lot of people too like to use plastic, landscape plastic as a weed barrier, and that works to some extent. We had plastic up in our garden, and when we pulled it up, I saw thistles growing underneath it without any sunlight whatsoever. I don't understand it all, but there it was. The cardboard is nice because it's going to break down, and you're not going to get microfibers released from the plastic into the environment, which is a really, really important. And it's cheap or free and pretty easy. So
yeah, and that way you're keeping your little reptilian relatives happy, healthy, safe too, as they're not getting stuck up in the fabric.
Oh yeah, what does the plastic do to your reptiles and rodents in the garden?
They can get stuck in it, and that's a really a gruesome way to go. We're not trying to promote that means to an end for any of our creeping, crawling friends. And when you put it down too, it makes this nice moist environment that encourages worms to come up through it. So they'll break down the soil for you and be really happy, and you're not killing any other reptiles.
Sid, why might you want reptiles or rodents in your garden?
They're supporting a diversity of creatures in your garden is good because they'll eat problematic pests. So for example, if you have a lot of bull snakes, they'll probably eat mice or groundhog type things that are eating your roots on your veggies and stuff. So they kind of help to predate on any kind of things that are causing your garden havoc. Yeah, that's kind of the big piece, and also just trying to treat the earth how you'd want it to be treated and do good by it. But an important thing to note though, if you decide to put down cardboard like we are, make sure to take all the tape off, because the tape is not going to break down no matter how much you water it. So. And then I think the next step, since this looks pretty good to go, is watering it in. Yeah, Mairi?
Yeah.
If you don't have a fancy hose like we do, you can always take a milk jug and cut the top 4 to 5 inches off, and then just fill that up with water. That's a gallon-ish, and so you can always just do that too and water it in until it looks wet. You're going to water in between all the different layers of this process, so if you're a little nervous about it being too dry at first, you'll be watering it again, so no stress.
And Sid, why do you want to water in each layer and just water in general? Why is that important?
It's kind of like it's like when you put cookies in the oven, of how they start off as cookie dough, you put them in the oven, they become cookies. It's kind of the same with this. You can have all these layers of materials, and you go from having these layers of materials, and once you add water, that's the defining part that takes it from being these layers to making it into a degradable soil. So if you don't have water, it's kind of just going to hang out, not do much throughout the winter. Maybe it'll get rustled around, but it's just kind of stay cardboard, straw, and organic materials.
I'm going to grab the straw. And can you tell everyone why you might want to use straw and not hay, and what the difference between the two of them is?
That's a great question. Something I've been learning myself. So, contrary to what you might think, straw does not have seeds in it. Straw is just this beautiful, golden, chappy goodness. But hay has weed seeds in it, and so if you add hay, it might sound good, but then you're going to get all these weed seeds all spring long, which is kind of not what you're going for. It's counterintuitive, if you will. So if you're using your compost too, make sure that when you're adding weeds, or not weeds, but you're adding plant matter to your compost pile, that you're not adding weed seeds. So foxtail grass or clover, or kind of you might see here that this has got some beautiful seeds going on. It looks pretty, it's cute. It will come up in your next spring if you put this into your garden, so make sure to not put things like this that are seedy. But you can put the straw part, so straw, not hay, straw.
If you don't want to put the weeds in your compost pile, you might be wondering what you should do with them. So you want to be really careful to avoid putting them in the pile, but if you do put weeds in the compost pile, that's okay. You're just going to want to make sure that you monitor the temperature or that you're not putting that same soil back onto your garden, because then the weed seeds will grow. But so the reason you also want to make sure that you're watering in your straw is because this is very lightweight, and if you don't, it's probably going to blow away.
If you can't find straw or don't have $10, that's totally okay. You can also always go get some like black and white newspaper, anything kind of like that. The big goal is that you're going to have this really dense, takes a little bit longer to break down cardboard. You're going to have this a lot quicker to decompose kind of other layer of brown materials. And then you're going to want to have this, the next thing we'll do, which is this green layer of kitchen scrap type stuff. So just any kind of material that would be quicker to decompose. You could use like the Dreamcatcher newsletter that comes out. That would be a great option. Once you're done reading it, you cut out all of your relatives' pictures. This would be a great option for it. If it's like really glossy, like People Today or something like that, maybe don't put that on there, because like the glossy stuff is usually a little bit more chemical heavy. And water it in.
So don't worry about overwatering at this point. You want to make sure that it's saturated. I would say one other important thing to mention is that you might have noticed Sid and I are trying not to walk on the bed itself. And that's probably less important at this stage, but it's just a good habit that you want to get into, whether you're building up your beds with lasagna gardening or if you're tilling the soil by hand or by machine. You don't want to walk on your garden beds, because the purpose of doing those activities, tilling or layering, is to create nice, loose, rich soil that has room for the roots. And if you're stepping on it, you're compacting that soil, and it's just going to be harder for the plants to grow. So in general, good habit is to avoid walking directly on your garden beds, and that's why we've got these walkways.
Yeah. Stay tuned though, because if you really need to get around, there are some different options you could do, like pallet gardening, which we'll touch on a later date, or putting stepping stones through your garden. So if you like need to kneel or stand right next to the plant, because that's how your body works best, there are lots of options out there. But
Raised beds work great.
Yeah.
You can't bend down. There are a lot of ways to make gardening accessible for everyone. So
yeah.
Compost next?
Yeah, let's do it.
So we have this slightly fancy compost tumbler, but you don't need one of these. Up at the Three Sisters garden behind Turtle Creek, we have 3 separate compost bins, and that's so that, like we were talking about earlier, so that we can rotate. And those were made out of pallets. So you can get pallets for free. There's a lot of different places. Just throw them together with some rebar, and that's all you need. You don't even need pallets. You can just start a pile.
Yeah, that's what my grandma does.
Just a pile?
Yeah, single piles. So if you have an option, if you kind of have this pile, you could use a shovel. Yeah. Out this beautiful green, big quotation marks, that's what this part's called, goodness. We are going to spread it out a little bit. You can use your hands. I'm going to use this rake because it's fun.
more compost in the tumbler than there was. You're going to want a nice thicker layer of compost, so we might come back another day. We've got some compost at our house and layer a little more, but this is the general idea.
Egg two kind of got spread out, so and you can tell because there's only one layer of this stuff, there's two layers of the brown stuff. So we're going to kind of keep this process up. We might have to do one more layer of each. We're going to water this in first though, but this is kind of the general method.
More cardboard?
Yeah, let's do it.
If people have friends who are ranchers with aged manure, is that something that they want to layer into the lasagna garden?
That definitely is an option. If you didn't catch it, the big descriptive adjective Mairi used at the beginning of that was age. That's the name of the game. If you're using fresh manure, it can be full of a lot of bacteria that can make the food harmful for you and your relatives. But if it's been aged, like if it's been sitting out doing its thing for like a while, like longer than a year.
At least a year, not less than a year.
Mm-hmm. So if you have a buddy who's had some manure that's been there for like a year and a half or something, they're trying to move stuff around, definitely ask them if you can use some. If not, it's super nitrogen heavy. And the nitrogen is the stuff that you're getting out of this, like the brown material and also some of the green materials. So like that's like a really big nutrient piece. So if you do have a buddy with aged manure, hit them up, because that would be a great resource.
Aged manure is also really nice to add as a soil amendment in the spring if you need that for your garden. So spring or fall, as long as it's aged.
Yeah, and make sure when you do add it though, to spread it out, because it is high in nitrogen. So if you put a lot of manure on in one small area, you're gonna burn, is the word people use, your stuff. So make sure to only use some and to mix it in really well with other things so you're not just adding too much nitrogen. Also probably try and add it in the earlier spring, because if you add it in the heat of the summer, that also could really hurt your plants.
Glass water. So that's our bed. And that's just going to sit over the winter. We're going to be working out here the next few weeks getting the rest of the garden ready, so we might water it a bit just to help it break down more. If it's really dry this winter, we might water it some as well, but if there's snow, we probably won't. And in the spring, we're going to have soil. So not only does layering the beds in the fall allow it to break down over the winter, I know personally, I don't really want to be outside working the soil in March and April when it's going to be really cold and the ground's going to be hard, and it's just going to be, it's feasible, but it's a lot more work. So I think this is an easier way to get your planting season started off right in the spring. It's just put your plants in the ground and go from there.
And if there's any cardboard still on top and you start to feel stressed, don't worry about it. You can just take your little hand trowel, you can dig a little hole in the cardboard, and then you're not going to get any weeds, and you're still going to have some really fantastic plants. So yeah, thanks for joining us and
Listening to us ramble about gardens and compost and all the fun stuff.
yeah, so feel free to try it. If you do, send us a pic or a video. Let us know how it went for you, because we love to hear how gardening's going for everybody else.
And if you've got any questions, message us on Facebook.